Chapter 776, Preparations. Without the high tea session, Klein decided to pray at St. Samuel Cathedral, so as to show his devoutness. Of course, he didn't forget to stop and admire the white pigeons on the square, allowing himself to appear leisurely and calm. He entered the cathedral, passing through the murals that were illuminated by the sun from high above and arriving at a dark and deep prayer hall. This place wasn't as gorgeously decorated like the other churches that had all kinds of dazzling, elegant taste that produced a visual impact. Instead, it was mild and peaceful, allowing one to feel a natural sense of tranquility. As for the pure light that resembled twinkling stars up ahead, they were filled with the intense solemnity of holiness. Klein removed his hat and handed it to Richardson along with his cane. Then he walked down the aisle. At this moment, two figures stood up in the front pew and turned towards the entrance. One of them was the black-haired, green-eyed Leonard Mitchell, who looked suave with his untidy hair. Almost at the same moment, Leonard Mitchell also saw the middle-aged man with the white sideburns and deep blue eyes, Dwayne Dantes. He tensed up momentarily as his body showed signs of indiscernible stiffness. Klein gave Leonard a side look as he nodded with a smile. He had a friendly and casual expression. Leonard forced a smile as he nodded in a slightly sluggish manner. Following that, he turned to the side, made way, and brushed shoulders with Dwayne Dantes. This made Klein see who the person was behind him. It was also someone he knew, Daly, who was wearing a spirit medium's black robe. This lady still wore blue eyeshadow and blush, presenting quite an uncanny sense of beauty. Daly glanced at the middle-aged gentleman when her expression suddenly went adrift. She retracted her gaze as she silently approached the exit.
No way, I was just mimicking Captain's profound eyes. Even the color is different, yet Ma'am Daly could still find it familiar. A woman's intuition is truly terrifying.
Klein had a vague guess when he noticed Daly's brief abnormality. A long time ago, as an insensitive man, he believed that Ma'am Daly was secretly in love with Captain. Otherwise, she wouldn't have endured the risk to rush to Tingen to get Klein to find an opportunity to teach the acting method to Dunsmith. As for Captain, Klein wasn't sure about his thoughts. After all, Dunsmith, at that moment, was often unable to distinguish reality from a dream. His bad memory was rather pronounced, and he might unknowingly have forgotten certain things that lay at the bottom of his heart. However, Captain often mentions Ma'am Daly, using her as an example to educate us. He was so familiar with how many years she took to advance and the kind of talent she had that it seemed like he had memorized it. Yes, whenever Captain mentioned these matters, he would occasionally add that he spent 9 years going from midnight poet to nightmare.
Could it be that he was feeling a little inferior when facing Ma'am Daly? Inferior.
Klein recalled the past as his mood suddenly felt dampened. He realized that he didn't really understand Dunsmith. He didn't understand how many things the man had hidden inwardly.
And Ma'am Daly isn't much younger than him. She appears to be very open and doesn't care about marriage.
Klein silently sighed and reined in his thoughts. He found a nearby pew and bowed his head, closing his eyes to pray. Outside the prayer hall, Leonard had recovered as he gathered with the other Red Gloves teammates with Daly. They waited for a while as Soest, who had become a spirit warlock, walked out from another side. He scanned them and said,
"Our mission this time is to use the various clues discovered from the explosion of the Black Skeleton Gang's headquarters to find all the formal members of the Numinous Episcopate in Backland. Ma'am Daly is a beyonder from the Corpse Collector pathway. She knows quite a bit about the Numinous Episcopate, so His Grace, St. Anthony, has gotten her to assist us."
In the evening, Klein, who had dismissed Richardson, took 4 steps counterclockwise and entered above the gray fog. He conjured the world-Gehrman sparrow and made his blurry figure pray.
Please inform Miss Magician that she needs to reserve a hotel room before Friday night. It's best that it's far from the place where Mr. X holds the gathering. Pass me the stone and spell book ahead of time. I need to make certain preparations. K. Kate. On Friday night, she needs to stop her friend, who participates in Mr. X's gathering, and also present to me that person's external appearance when in disguise. If there's anything else, I'll inform her in time.
With only 2 days left before the assassination attempt on Mr. X, Klein undoubtedly needed to prepare ahead of time. And there were many things that needed preparation. Dwayne Dantes wasn't able to do everything, so he had to rely on Miss Magician. His preliminary plan was to use the powers of a faceless to disguise himself as a participant in Mr. X's gathering. He would enter directly with the passcode, and then he would employ different plans based on the situation. According to the experience he had in engaging in combat and controlling his marionette, Klein had a feeling that a marionettist principal was trying to hide behind the scenes, covertly directing a script. Unless necessary, a marionettist had to avoid engaging in direct combat with others.
Currently, the most troublesome point is that Mr. X's gathering is at 8, and usually at this time, Dwayne Dantes clearly wouldn't have fallen asleep. He won't be able to escape the notice of his butler and servants and secretly head to Eastborough. Of course, on the contrary, it can also create an alibi, but the problem is, what method should I use to fool everyone in his house? If only I had a faceless partner who can act as Dwayne Dantes. Miss Justice's necklace can do it, but she's not in Backland.
Klein leaned back into his chair as he rubbed his temples. He had even considered directly summoning and responding to himself, using his identity as Hero Bandit Black Emperor to carry out the operation, but doing so would cause him to lose the ability to change his physical appearance. It also made it difficult for him to possess others and disguise as Force's friend to participate in the gathering.
Unless Miss Magician's friend is a part of this, allowing me to possess him or her, that wouldn't do either. First, it will expose some of the Tarot Club's secrets, and second, Mr. X might have the means to discover a wraith. Of course, traces of this can be concealed using a series of seals with a gold coin, the paper angel, or the iron cigar case.
Klein considered for a while before deciding on a method he was very proficient in from his previous life.
Feigning sickness. I'll begin acting sick tomorrow. I'll eat very little and sleep before 8. This way, the butler and servants wouldn't disturb me. But if there's an emergency, what do I do when Walter and company knock on the door? A magician's illusion creation can only fool the eyes. It isn't some artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence. Right, I can fix the illusion onto a mirror, letting it look like Dwayne Dantes. Then, I'll get a Rhodes to answer remotely.
With this in mind, Klein's thoughts suddenly opened up.
I have to say that Arrow can be quite useful at times.
After a poignant comment, Klein returned to the real world. He walked to the desk, took out pen and paper, and began drawing a picture comprising of symbols that implied concealment and mystery prying. Just as he finished his final stroke, the room's lighting dimmed suddenly. The full-body mirror first turned deep black before silver light surfaced. Loanese text appeared one after another.
Great Master, your loyal and humble servant Arodes heard your summoning. Was I late?
There's something new every time.
Klein shook his head in amusement.
No.
How tolerant you are of me, Great Master. You can ask your question.
Words neatly appeared on the mirror. Klein thought for a moment before saying,
I plan on eliminating the Aurora Order Oracle, Mr. X. Do you have any suggestions?
The full-body mirror's words froze for a few seconds before changing.
It's best you do it after Thursday.
It's in line with my divination. Angel of Fate Ouroboros, or a saint of the Aurora Order, might be around Mr. X tonight and on Thursday.
Klein smiled and said,
Rhodes, I have something that requires your help.
This is my honor. You are giving me an opportunity.
Words quickly emerged, fully professing what it meant to be excited and delighted.
May I ask what the mission is?
Klein nodded and said,
This Friday night I will be using a mirror as an illusion prop, changing it to look like my present identity. If any emergencies happen, you're in charge of controlling the mirror to answer without letting anyone discover any abnormalities. Can you do it?
The air around the full-body mirror suddenly gushed around, and a toady voice belonging to Dwayne Dantes sounded,
Great Master, I'll try my best to complete anything you command. Although it won't be able to last long, and it doesn't match my usual habits, it's enough to deal with everyone here. If you wish, I can simulate any voice.
You're more talented than I expected. It's not easy being a mirror these days. However, why does that final statement sound odd?
Klein's facial muscles trembled as he said,
When dealing with them, hide the nature of the question and answer game. Don't let others notice it.
Rhodes immediately presented a new sentence on the full-body mirror.
I will play your identity well.
Very good.
Klein nodded. He was truly worried that Rhodes would begin asking butler Walter and valet Richardson embarrassing questions. Questions like, have you fantasized about ladies you shouldn't have any urges for? Or who do you think of late at night when resolving your physical needs? He believed that with the magic mirror's way of doing things, it might very well carry out such an act without any forewarning. Back then, Donitz nearly broke down thanks to its questions. Without speaking any further, Klein switched to saying,
That will be all for today. I'll contact you again on Friday night.
Yes, great master. Your humble servant already looks forward to serving you.
Rhodes first conjured a single line before producing a drawing of a hand waving. Chapter 777, Sick and Crazy Setup. On Friday afternoon, Klein, who had skipped a literary salon because of his feigned sickness, arrived above the gray fog once again. In front of him was a hard-covered, palm-sized notebook which was bronze green in color. It was Leimano's Travels, which the magician Fors had provided. After flipping the item, which was closer to a spellbook, over to a certain page, Klein looked at the yellowish-brown page, raised his hand, and summoned the sea god scepter from the junk pile. As he injected some of his spirituality into Leimano's Travels, making it light up with a faint luster, he made the blue gem on the scepter's tip emit a bright light. A sizzling sound was produced as bolts of silver lightning appeared out of thin air. They were thick and menacing as they zapped about, meshing together to form a hurricane. At the same time, complicated symbols and labels quickly outlined themselves on the page of Leimano's Travels. They overlapped each other and fused together, slowly taking shape. Just as the page was about to be colored in silver, bolts of lightning snaked out from it, causing all the patterns to be destroyed. It failed again. Klein sighed silently as he repeated the same process. Puea. This wasn't his first attempt. Ever since he obtained Leimano's Travels on Wednesday night, he would head above the gray fog from time to time, using this spellbook to record the powers produced by the sea god scepter. He repeated it until his spirituality was nearly drained, forcing him to return to the real world to take a break. During this process, there were successes and failures. Klein relied on repeated attempts before completing the final step, recording the lightning storm spell which he had eyed for a very long time. This was a demigod power of the sailor pathway. Before that failure, Klein had failed nearly 20 times. It could be said that his luck was terrible. After repeated failures, he was delighted to see a silver luster spread across the yellowish page at the 5th attempt. An ancient, mysterious, complicated, and indescribable symbol contracted, forming a fancy diagram that made anyone who placed their eyes on it feel as though they were being struck by lightning.
Phew, I've finally succeeded.
Klein rubbed his fingers against the paper and heaved a long sigh of relief. He flipped through Leimano's Travels and admired his previous efforts. Over the past 2 days, he wasn't fully caught up with Lightning Storm. He also recorded 2 other demigod powers. One of them was Paper Angel that he had used while stirring some of the powers above the gray fog. It aided in disrupting any divination and prophecies. Similarly, there was Hurricane that stemmed from the sea god scepter. When recording them, Klein was rather lucky. One took 9 times, while the other took 12 before he succeeded. As for Flight, Glide, Lightning Strike, and other powers that didn't reach sequence 4, they only required him to do it once or twice. Therefore, Klein had almost filled the entire book.
This spellbook isn't very useful to unaffiliated Beyonders. It needs plenty of time and patience to record a sufficient number of powers. And when the powers exceed sequence 6, the chances of failure increases, making the powers difficult to obtain. However, there are 22 pathways in the mystical domain. If the first few sequences have their powers matched well, finishing off a sequence 5 isn't too surprising.
Klein closed Leimano's Travels and sighed inwardly. From his point of view, the spellbook was equivalent to half a divine artifact for unaffiliated Beyonders. Although it was more difficult to be useful than creeping hunger in its early stages, once there was a good combination, it was quite normal for one to fight someone of a higher sequence. However, among Beyonders who were supported by major factions, Lemano's travels would be ridiculously powerful. This was because it could record a demigod's powers, he thought.
As long as they wish, a demigod can repeat the power again and again. As for creeping hunger, it has a high chance of failing to devour a demigod. Even a real shepherd would find it extremely difficult to graze a high-sequence Beyonder. Firstly, there are no available resources, and secondly, it's easy to lose control. Elder Lovia from the City of Silver was someone lucky enough to be able to graze a Sequence 4 evil spirit.
When Klein thought of this, he cast his gaze onto a dark, green, coarse stone. It was rough and uneven with signs of burn marks. It was none other than Force's stone that allowed the traversal of the spirit world.
With Lemano's travels in this stone, along with the Fate Siphon Charm and Wraith Marionette, even if Mr. X has a saint protecting him, I should still be able to complete the mission and leave without problems.
Klein rubbed his temples and returned to the real world. After setting up a bestowment ritual, he brought the corresponding items back, Bishai's. After making all the preparations, he walked to the full-body mirror and looked at himself. He made himself look haggard. After dinner, Klein had used the excuse of not being well to return to his room. After taking in the night scenery, he took out a palm-sized mirror from the drawer and placed it on the soft and elastic pillow. Then Klein went over, making the mirror reflect the blue-eyed, white-side-burned Dwayne Dantes. He then slowly straightened his body and took a step back, creating another Dwayne Dantes in bed. This gentleman was wearing silk pajamas and leaning against a pillow. He held a book in hand with his eyes half closed, as though he was in thought.
Not bad, the mirror illusion isn't weaker than a paper figurine illusion.
Klein returned to the desk and picked up a fountain pen, drawing the strange symbol that was a mixture of concealment and mystery prying. After a brief silence, the Dwayne Dantes in bed suddenly opened his eyes and gave a toady smile.
Great master, your loyal and humble servant, Rhodes, is here.
I have to say that even with Dwayne Dantes' face, there's no way he can look normal with that kind of smile.
Klein silently sighed and nearly turned to look to his side.
Very good.
He praised with a nod. He didn't give any other instructions. With a half-top hat, he slid down from the balcony to the first floor. He followed the secluded garden trail and flipped over the corner perimeter wall of 160 Boakland Street. During this process, he hadn't forgotten to close the windows. Pressing his right hand on his hat and landing his feet on the streets, Klein slowly looked up. At some point in time, his facial features and outline had changed. He had black hair and brown eyes, with a thin and angular face. This was the crazy adventurer, Gehrman Sparrow, who had a bounty of 50,000 pounds from just a single country. The hunt was about to begin. Chairwood Borough. Gio, who was just about to head out to Eastborough to participate in Mr. X's Beyonder gathering, was stopped by Fours. Gio deliberated before saying the words her friend often used.
You want to head out to gather material?
Fours stroked her hair and said,
No, to earn money. I previously accepted a mission to find the dust left behind after a ghost fades away. As you know, there aren't any ghosts at the cemetery. They've all been given a send-off by the priests and bishops to their respective deities' kingdom. Therefore, I can only head over to Eastborough and find targets that died due to various reasons without being discovered. Can you bear letting such a beautiful and frail lady like me head into such a messy place alone?
Gio said hesitantly.
But can't you push it back a day? I'm planning to participate in Mr. X's gathering.
Fours immediately shook her head.
No, I need to complete the mission tomorrow. It's a total of 50 pounds.
Gio looked suspiciously at her friend.
If it's due tomorrow, why didn't you do it the past few days?
Fours chuckled.
Is this your first day knowing me? Don't you know I have a severe case of procrastination? Besides, you have no money. What's the point of going to Mr. X's gathering? You don't even know what Beyonder ingredients you need?
That's true.
CO was convinced before she smiled.
Does every author have a sickness of procrastination?
Probably.
As Forbes perfunctorily replied, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. In the East Borough, inside a cheap motel, Klein entered the room which Miss Magician had reserved for him under a fake alias. Here, having a room and a bed for one person was an extravagance, but even so, such rooms only cost 12 pence a night. Of course, many of the cheap motels in East Borough didn't have any single rooms. The best of them were some compartments that cost 5 pence a night. It only had a bed and a partition that blocked others from looking inside, allowing the occupants to change clothes. As for the 10 to 20 bunk beds in the basement, they cost 1.5 pence a night. The motel didn't hold any responsibilities for the items that one stored there.
There's actually a mirror. Not bad.
Klein put down his hat and stood in front of a full-body mirror filled with crevices. He then wore the hooded robe which Miss Magician had prepared for him. Immediately after that, his body shrank at a discernible pace. His skin gradually turned pale, with a tinge of malt colors. The Adam's apple at his throat vanished as his hair grew long and turned blonde. Klein instantly recognized the image of Forrest's friend, even though the disguise didn't show her looks. It was Miss CO. However, because there was a hood to conceal himself, he didn't really transform into a woman. All he did was handle the easily noticeable spots.
I can't do anything about the height of 150 centimeters. I'll need to digest the entirety of my potion before I can reach this limit. Thankfully, Miss CO disguises herself by raising her height. I don't have to vex over this.
Klein looked at the 160-centimeter tall figure in the mirror, switched to a pair of leather boots that looked to be and was flat-soled. After donning the disguise, Klein hooded himself and silently left the single room from the window. He came to an alley in East Borough, taking a detour until he arrived outside the building where Mr. X was hosting the Beyonder gathering. After recalling the passcode which Miss Magician had provided, Klein rapped the door with his fingers, 3 light taps and 3 heavy taps, separated by 2 long and 3 short intervals. After 10 seconds, the door silently opened. An attendant wearing an iron mask first observed the visitor before making way. Klein calmly walked past him and entered the building without showing any signs of panic. Chapter 778, 1 + 1 is greater than 2. While passing through the living room, Klein's spiritual perception was triggered. He felt that there was an invisible gaze scanning him from an unknown location, 7,5 Kiap. He feigned ignorance as he entered the activity room ahead. He surveyed the area and found a spot that wasn't too far or close to the host's seat. And at the moment he passed through the activity room's door, all the attention on him vanished. If not for the wraith having 3 seals to isolate it, it probably would have been noticed. Mr. X doesn't appear to be as bold and crazy as he seems. Klein sat down and moved his hood, hiding his face deeper in the shadows. After about 10 minutes, when most of the members had arrived, a brass mask-wearing Mr. X appeared by the door without causing a commotion. He walked in and headed towards his seat. Massino. He was dressed in a black classical robe with a pointed mage hat. As he walked, he had a converged aura, but it was enough to make everyone present bow their heads without realizing it. Turning around and slowly taking his seat, Mr. X surveyed the room and said in a deep voice,
Let's begin.
"He's within 4 meters." Klein wasn't in a rush to take action. He retracted his gaze and patiently watched as a few gathering members exchanged information about people with abnormal luck for money. Occasionally, Mr. X would reply. Time ticked by as the gathering's focus went from Mr. X's act of handing out rewards to the transactions between the members. Klein didn't hesitate as he tapped his left thumb on the first segment of his index finger twice, activating his spirit-body thread's vision. Illusory black threads immediately surfaced before his eyes as they emanated from the bodies of different people, out into the void towards some boundless distance. After making a simple distinction of the threads, Klein began to secretly control Mr. X's spirit-body threads. There were 2 difficulties to this mission according to his plan. The first was that having astrologer as one of the earlier jobs in his pathway, Mr. X, or the other hidden Aurora Order saint, might be able to sense the danger when he began controlling the spirit-body threads, acutely sensing some abnormality. Klein wasn't sure about Mr. X's spiritual intuition because back when Miss Sharon, female, existed in a wraith state, she failed to notice marionettist Razagos, male, controlling of her spirit-body threads. However, for a saint who was a demigod, a high sequence beyonder who had obtained godhood, no special trait of this being would surprise Klein. It wasn't surprising if that being's spiritual intuition was triggered due to the changes in another person's spirit-body threads. For other marionettists, they were probably helpless regarding this, but Klein was different. He had another identity as the Fool. He had the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog to aid him, allowing him to rely on paper angels to produce interference and eliminate any hidden problems. The gathering continued without any abnormalities. More than 10 seconds passed as Klein was close to gaining initial control of Mr. X. There was only 3 seconds left, but this Aurora Order Oracle didn't notice at all. He continued observing the completion of another transaction with a deep look in his eyes, his thoughts a mystery. At the critical moment, Klein stopped. He barely maintained his progress as he extended his hand, reaching into the pocket of the hooded robe and touching the iron cigar case, which had been sealed with a wall of spirituality. Klein moved his fingers, prodding it gently to remove the wall of spirituality, allowing it to disperse into a swirling wind inside his pocket. He pulled back his palm and waited for a few more seconds until Mr. X's gaze looked to the side before he continued controlling the spirit-body threads. 2 seconds. 1 second. 0! Mr. X's thoughts turned sluggish as though someone had poured stirred cement onto him. Nanami, danger! Slow thoughts appeared in his head as he quickly made his decision. He planned on seeking help from his subordinates and the entity who was watching in secret, and put up an effective resistance. At this moment, coldness drilled into his body, preventing his limbs and mouth from answering his will. Admiral of Blood Senior, male, a wraith's possession. There were many flaws to a marionettist's control of spirit-body threads. The biggest problem was the target immediately realizing that there was a problem once initial control was attained. They would then have the ability to carry out any contingencies. If it was one-on-one, without anyone around them, Klein could naturally use the target's increasingly impeded state to effectively disrupt and interfere with any resistance they put up. But if the target had any aids, it was very difficult for a marionettist's control to fool others. It required help from the environment, or partners to conceal the matter without exposing it. And on this point, a wraith who was able to possess a target and forcefully control them was the best support for a marionettist. The reason why Klein didn't directly enter a state of initial control was because he needed to release the wraith. After the initial inspection at the door, the vigilance in the activity room at the gathering location was definitely lower. Mr. X's eyes widened as his thoughts turned sluggish. His instinctive attempt to shout was blocked by his throat and mouth, silencing him completely. His attempt to raise his hands also slowed down as they reached for a porcelain teacup by his side. Commercially, this completely violated his will. It was because of the cold aura that occupied every corner of his body.
Wraith. Marionettist. No. If this continues, I'll die silently.
Mr. X immediately controlled his spirituality as he constructed complicated symbols and labels in his mind. He was just about to open a traveler's door, which was also the door of teleportation, to escape the marionettist's control range. Compared to that, a wraith's possession was relatively less dangerous, but amidst his sluggish thoughts, the illusory symbols and labels failed to appear all at once. Instead, they appeared one stroke after another, in a discontinuous manner, and at an insufficient speed. Seizing this opportunity, Wraith Senior, male, who was possessing Mr. X, under marionettist Klein's control, simply moved Mr. X's head, changing his seating position. Such an action instantly interrupted the formation of the traveler's door.
Oh no, my reaction is too slow. It will be interfered by the wraith. Use mystical item.
Mr. X's eyes filled with blood, but none of his subordinates around him noticed it. Even the one watching in secret didn't notice any abnormalities. As for the gathering members who were interacting and trading, they lowered their voices because of his change in seating posture. At that moment, the activity room was filled with people. Although there were beyonders everywhere, and many were his assistants, Mr. X found himself in extreme solitude and was helpless. He didn't even know who was attacking him or where the attacker was sitting. As the thoughts went through his mind, Mr. X regained control of his spirituality as he directed it towards the golden ring with an embedded ruby on his left index finger. However, going from a thought to a decision, and then going from a decision to an action took too long. It was as though he was acting out his thought processes in slow motion. This gave Señor Male plenty of time to raise Mr. X's left palm, bend his finger, and tap the side of his forehead, which was uncovered by the brass mask as though in thought. It was a very faint tapping sound, and the strength used was quite significant, but under Klein's control, Señor Male held back perfectly. It made most of the strength enter Mr. X's mind without spreading outwards, so as to hide any commotion. Tack, tack! Mr. X's thoughts of emanating his spirituality were disrupted, and he was temporarily unable to find his train of thought. By the time he recovered, the marionette's control had deepened. This made his thoughts chaotic and impeded. Even his thinking and decision-making became extremely difficult. With the Wraith using all kinds of tiny, concealed actions to interfere with Mr. X's attempts to use his various beyonder powers and impressive mystical items, he slowly slid towards the abyss of becoming a marionette. He watched helplessly as he marched towards death slowly. Only then did he realize how terrifying and unsolvable the combination of a marionettist and Wraith was. The hunt continued silently under everyone's noses. As Klein's control deepened, Mr. X's actions turned stiffer and sluggish. However, with the Wraith possessing him, no one could notice any problems. To be precise, Mr. X's actions were no longer a result of the sluggish him, but from Wraith Señor Male. He wasn't even able to show the look of despair in his eyes. Amidst the transactions that either succeeded or failed, ranging from arguments to negotiations, 5 minutes quickly passed. Klein was just one last step from killing Mr. X and turning him into his marionette. However, he couldn't do so. Higher time. This was because he had yet to digest much of the marionettist potion. He could only control one marionette at present, so if he wanted to convert Mr. X, he had to give up Wraith Señor Male. But once he gave up Señor Male, this Admiral of Blood who was long dead would immediately surface and be discovered by everyone. It would bring about extreme trouble. Similarly, if Klein didn't give up his Wraith marionette and assassinated Mr. X while he wasn't able to resist, he needed to consider the Aurora Order Saint who was lurking in the shadows. This was the second most difficult part of his plan. To silently control Mr. X and remove his ability to resist wasn't difficult with the combination of marionettist and Wraith. The way to kill him wasn't difficult as well. Mr. X in his present state could easily be finished off by Klein with an air bullet. The difficulty was in leaving safely after pulling off such a stunt. This actually required sufficient patience. Time slowly passed, with Klein appearing calm despite his tensed nerves. He pretended that he wasn't interested in the items that appeared as he kept silent the entire time. Finally, when the gathering came to an end, Mr. X said in a deep voice with complete normality,
The end.
His words were succinct, just like the way he ended the previous gathering. This was what CO, female, described to Fours, female. As the gathering's members stood up one by one, Klein mixed in among them, looking inconspicuous. At the same time, he reached his hand into his pocket and he flipped open Lemano's travels based on his sense of touch. Chapter 779, One Shot. The 3 types of paper in Lemano's travels clearly had different textures. The white paper that could only record sequence 7, 8, and 9 powers was thin, smooth, and flat. The yellowish-brown goatskin, which could record sequence 5 and 6 powers, were very pliable, like tanned leather. The 3 charred yellow pages that could record godhood powers were thick and textured. Together they allowed someone to quickly distinguish between them simply from touch. Klein's fingers quickly found the thick and textured 3 pages as he gently pinched the middle page. Although his pocket wasn't large enough, preventing him from fully opening Lemano's travels, the hooded robe was personally modified by Force herself. The pocket had plenty of space, allowing the palm-size spellbook to be flipped to a right angle. As Klein used his palm to prevent Lemano's travels from closing, he used his finger to slide across the corresponding page's surface. The surface had slight bumps and depressions, making the strange patterns and symbols that were filled with mystery and ancient vibes be directly presented in his mind. He injected his spirituality into it. This charred yellow page recorded a demigod power of the storm pathway, hurricane. Klein wanted to use it to create chaos, so as to interfere with the Aurora Order saint who was lurking in the darkness. By doing so, he could seize the opportunity to assassinate Mr. X and escape with the help of the wind. Aside from this goal, the chaos could also effectively hide his tracks. By letting the members of the gathering scatter, and with everyone's identity being a mystery, doing so made everyone be a suspect. The Aurora Order would then find it difficult to pinpoint Geo. As his thoughts whirred, Klein locked his gaze onto a spot, and he slowly pulled out Lemano's travels. Meanwhile, Mr. X took 2 steps to Klein's side, standing near him like he was a friend he hadn't seen in years. Following that, there was a loud buzz as a terrifying hurricane spiraled out of control in front of everybody. It was where Klein had targeted his spirituality at. The tables, coffee tables, sofa, and high-back chairs in the room flew up as the violent hurricane ripped through the walls, carrying the roof away as it headed for the alley. Some of the gathering's participants were in the way of the hurricane and were thrown far away, while others fell forward due to the wind pressure as they ran in another direction. If Klein hadn't purposely controlled the timing and direction of the hurricane, not only would Mr. X's old house be destroyed, but even the series of condominiums around it would suffer damage. As for the gathering participants, they would have been swept up in the hurricane, having their survival depend solely on luck. The buzzing sounds quickly intensified as the hurricane that reached into the sky was like a terrifying giant. It stomped across the alley towards the street, leaving nothing behind in its wake. Klein was similarly swept up as he and the possessed Mr. X were thrown onto another street. During this process, as both of them were standing close to one another, along with how a wraith could float, these could control the target's body to a certain extent, even with the hurricane. Therefore, the distance between Klein and Mr. X ultimately stayed within 5 meters. His control of the spirit body threads had never been terminated. In midair, with the howling winds in his ear, Klein suddenly yanked at his chest with his right hand, tearing away the hooded robe's surface, reached under his arm and drew death knell. Although in Mr. X's current state, where just air bullets alone could finish him off, Klein decided to be cautious. He was afraid that certain mystical items on his body would suddenly be triggered, just like Admiral of Blood Senior's necklace. When hunting, it was necessary to do his best. Klein's vigorous action of drawing his revolver had obviously affected his control of the spirit body threads. If it wasn't because Mr. X was on the brink of being fully controlled, just this alone was enough to recover his usual lucidness. However, even so, Mr. X's thoughts were no longer impeded as his mind sped up. He attempted to resist, but with Wraith Seniors possessing him, it had forced his efforts to be in vain for a brief moment. Then, Mr. X's eyes reflected an enemy who swooped downward. It was a thin face with pronounced facial lines. In his vision, the person coldly cocked a revolver, pointing the black barrel at him. Bang! Klein didn't hesitate to pull the trigger as the gunshot was drowned by the howling winds. Mr. X's head jerked backwards as though an invisible hand had pressed onto it. His head and brass mask shattered into pieces, splattering red and white liquids everywhere. It was a lethal shot! Death knell had sounded the knell for him. Plop! After the shot, Klein fell to the ground on his back. With a thud, Mr. X landed beside him as the blood and fragments that scattered in midair had strangely flowed back, gathering by his neck and forming a head filled with cracks and crevices. This was the ability of a wraith. At that moment, the hurricane was starting to disperse, and the huge commotion had undoubtedly caught the notice of faraway demigods. Inside the Holy Wind Cathedral, the new Backland Archbishop, Deep Blue Efficient Randall Valentinus, instantly flew out of his room as he floated in the air. Klein, who had fallen on the ground, noticed that the wind pressure had weakened. With Death Knell in one hand and Le Mano's Travels in the other, he flipped the latter to the first yellowish-brown goatskin page. After obtaining this spellbook, he realized that there were a few pages recorded in it, with one of them being Traveler's Door. Klein originally imagined that it was a coincidence, but on careful thought, he found it inevitable. This was because Le Mano's Travels belonged to the ancient Abraham family. They wielded the apprentice pathway and several corresponding mystical items, so they had the resources to easily record a traveler's powers. After all, this was something very, very useful. At that moment, as long as the Traveler's Door was formed, Klein could leave unharmed with Mr. X's corpse that was being possessed by Rathseigneur. He hadn't used it in the building, because it was possible that the Aurora Order Saint might intercept it. Furthermore, Mr. X was also a traveler. He had a chance of successfully escaping via Traveler's Door. Therefore, Klein didn't dare risk it before he was completely dead. At that moment, Klein's vision went black as he realized that the surrounding streets were filled with a pitch-black and strange liquid. They surged over and quickly coagulated to form a strong cage. In such darkness, shadows began to come alive as cold gazes landed on him.
A demigod's power. The Aurora Order does have a saint nearby. There's no way to directly teleport away.
Klein's heart tensed up as he calmly flipped Le Mano's Travels to the charred yellow page. Sizzle! A silver python snaked out of thin air, embroiling itself with the darkness as it illuminated everything. Lightning storm! The coagulated pitch blackness shattered instantly. And without any hesitation, Klein stuffed his death knell-wielding right hand into his pocket, pinching the dark green stone that was filled with burn marks.
Door.
He chanted in ancient Hermes with an abnormally calm tone. A light blue brilliance burst out as Klein's figure rapidly turned into a blur. Even Mr. X's corpse, which had come close to grab onto his shoulder, had experienced similar changes. The two figures instantly turned invisible as they vanished from the spot. They quickly departed into the spirit world with overlapping saturated colors, pulling off an ingenious escape. In the shadowy alley with the flattened gathering building which had planks, rubble, clothes, and all kinds of random items strewn all around, someone harumphed.
Damn it.
At this moment, the other gathering members had already fled the street. From far away in the sky, a sonic boom could be heard. Zio and Fours, who were searching for ghosts in East Borough, were alarmed by the sky that suddenly lit up. They hurriedly looked into the distance and saw the silver forest that seemed to bloom like a forest. The twisted form and sense of horror had left them trembling despite the distance. They didn't even dare look straight at it.
What happened over there?
Zio mumbled as she exchanged looks with Fours blankly. Fours actually had a guess, but she found it difficult to believe. This was because it had far exceeded her expectations of the world Gehrman Sparrow's strength. In a dark alley, Klein appeared out of thin air with Mr. X's corpse as they landed on the ground. He wasn't flustered at all. He kept Death Knell in his pocket and then took out another book. Grozel's Travels! Smack! Klein smacked the book, written by Dragon of Imagination Ankoelt, onto Mr. X's face, staining the cover with blood. Moments later, Mr. X's corpse vanished, leaving behind Rathseigneur in his dark red coat and old triangular hat. Right on the heels of that, Klein put away Grozel's Travels, flipped open Le Mano's Travels, and made another charred yellow page face up. Suddenly, a bright light emitted from the book as an illusory angel with 12 wings flew up and landed on Klein. All of this happened in an instant before darkness returned to the alley. Only the dim moonlight continued illuminating the area silently. Klein immediately took out another metal bottle, poured out the blood stored inside, and uniformly smeared it across Le Mano's Travels. After doing all of this, he put away everything else, pulling away the hooded robe and throwing it beside him. A scarlet flame immediately soared up, burning the tattered robe clean. Meanwhile, Klein silently grew another 10 centimeters as he transformed into a relatively ordinary appearance. Then he identified his bearings with the help of the stars, and he picked up a fallen branch to assist him as he quickly toured through the dark and deteriorated streets, returning back to the cheap motel. At this point, he still had no idea what additional weakness he had been given. Inside the single room in the motel, Klein changed into his own clothes, turning back into Gehrman Sparrow. Seeing this thin and cold-looking crazy adventurer in the mirror, he fell silent for a few seconds, picking up the half-top hat and wearing it. Above the flattened building, Church of Storms Cardinal, Backlund Diocese Archbishop, Deep Blue Officiant Randall Valentinus, who had failed in capturing anyone, looked down in silence for an extended period of time. 160 Backlund Street, upon seeing the visitor outside.
Your Excellency, why are you suddenly here? Is there something?
Bishop Electra chuckled and said,
I heard that Dwayne is sick, so I'm here to visit him. Perhaps he will quickly recover under the goddess's blessings.
Chapter 780, Extract. Walter came to the third story and rapped on the master bedroom's door. Who is it? Dwayne Dantes' slightly weak and hoarse voice sounded. Walter turned the doorknob, opening a tiny crack in the door.
Sir, Bishop Electra is here to visit you. Do you wish to meet him in the living room or activity room, or should he be invited directly to your bedroom?
Usually, visitors weren't permitted to enter the master's bedroom. This was rather impolite, but visiting the sick was an exception. After a brief silence, Dwayne Dantes replied, Invite him into the bedroom.
All right, sir.
As Walter gestured Richardson to urge a maid to prepare some tea, he walked down and invited Bishop Electra of the Church of Evernight up. Soon, Electra entered the bedroom and saw Dwayne Dantes lying in bed, looking haggard. Richardson, get the bishop a seat. The pale Dwayne Dantes said with a smile. Vous? Richardson had already done so. He immediately moved a high-backed chair to a spot near the bed. However, Electra took a few steps forward to observe the new tycoon in town, and asked in concern,
Dwayne, how are you? Did you consult a physician?
His spiritual perception wasn't triggered, so he didn't make any attempts. He was only visiting a pious believer out of concern. Dwayne Dantes coughed lightly and smiled. I'm actually almost recovered. I believe I'll be able to head over to church tomorrow or the day after tomorrow to listen to your preachings.
It's good. I was wondering if I needed to pray to Goddess to bless you.
Electra chuckled and took a step back before sitting on the chair which Richardson had brought for him. At this moment, Dwayne Dantes glanced at the bishop and chuckled. Actually, I've always had a question. Are clergymen of the Church of the Goddess allowed to get married? Electra, who was 2 years short of reaching 40, sighed and smiled.
This question has actually troubled us for the longest time. Mi holy wata beduam. In ancient times, the archbishops had engaged in intense debates about this on several theosophical meetings. One side believed that servants of the goddess need to maintain their purity, be it men or women, otherwise it would be sacrilegious. The other side found words from the goddess in the Revelation of Evernight and other books, believing that the goddess encouraged marriage. She encouraged equality between both sexes and for them to have normal contact. Hence, clergymen should be an example of this and not be a negative example. By doing so, that would be the greatest respect towards the goddess. In recent times, this question has basically been shelved. The church doesn't ban or encourage it. The only request is that married clergymen are not to let their families live in the cathedrals.
Dwayne Dantes nodded slowly as he curled the corner of his lips. Your Excellency, do you have a wife? Although Bishop Electra was thin and not very good-looking, he was pleasant to the eyes. He sighed and said, hardly hiding his smile,
2 years ago, I walked down the aisle under the goddess's watch. I happen to have a child this year. Nan. I originally imagined that I would remain single my entire life in order to serve Goddess, but...
As he spoke, he gave a self-deprecating laugh and shook his head. Without waiting for Dwayne Dantes to probe deeper, Electra asked,
You seem to be single as well. Are you considering the problem of marriage?
He seemed to imagine that Dwayne Dantes had such thoughts, and he directly asked, imagining that the answer was certain as he continued.
What kind of lady do you like? Perhaps I might be able to help introduce you to someone.
Duane Dantes coughed lightly and said with a smile, I often chose adventures to amass wealth in the past, so I wasn't willing to get married, afraid I would drag her down. I like many types of women and am not picky. I like those older than me, ones who can give me warmth and make me feel at ease. Before he finished, his valet, Richardson, wore a stunned expression. He hurriedly turned his head aside and lowered it. Ja? He felt his face burning for some baffling reason. Burro. Duane Dantes didn't seem to sense it as he continued. I also like those younger than me, those who are pure and lively, making anyone who sees them feel as though it's dawn because of the radiance they aren't aware of. Bishop Electra's face suddenly froze as he raised his palm and clenched it into a fist as he held it to his mouth and coughed twice. Yet, Duane Dantes didn't stop. He shook his head and said with a sigh, I also like those who were once in love or were married so that people wouldn't dare approach due to their status, women who can only be viewed from afar. They are so charming that each action of theirs are so intoxicating and irresistible. I often dream. Butler Walter, who was standing nearby, trembled. He felt as though he had experienced a dream that he didn't wish to wake up from, despite opposing it greatly. He had no idea if it was a good or bad dream. Duane Dantes was about to continue to describe further, but he stopped producing any sound after opening his mouth. He then chuckled softly. That's all very normal. When humans are at their limits and are under the influence of their senses, they often have some abnormal thoughts. As long as they're repressed while acting in line with one's will, it wouldn't feel like torture. One would still be a husband, a good father, a good man.
That's very reasonable. When I'm incensed, I often have irrational thoughts, but few people will turn them into reality.
Bishop Electra ingeniously changed the subject. As for Butler Walter and valet Richardson, they revealed looks of contemplation. The bishop didn't stay long. After drinking a few sips of the marquis black tea that the maid delivered, he got up and bade farewell, leaving Duane Dantes's residence. The room quickly turned quiet as the window at the balcony silently opened. Klein, who had changed back into Duane Dantes, agilely leaped inside.
Thankfully, I returned in time. If I allowed Rhodes to continue speaking, Bishop Electra would probably renounce a pious believer like me. Perhaps I'll even discover Walter and Richardson hanging from their rooms tomorrow morning, and the streets would have rumors of Duane Dantes being a pervert.
Klein looked at the fake Duane on the bed and sighed silently. That final response had been personally formulated by him, and he got a Rhodes to read it. Of course, this was his contingency plan for the worst possible scenario. He had believed that a Rhodes wouldn't have made the situation develop that far.
Welcome back, Great Master.
The Duane Dantes in bed bowed and greeted.
Did your loyal and humble servant, Rhodes, do well?
Hearing the mirror stammer the question, Klein sighed and said,
It's still all right. You did pretty good, Nisa. However, try not to agitate others when chatting.
I will take note.
The fake Duane Dantes rapidly vanished as a small mirror appeared on the pillow. Above the mirror, silver light bloomed as words appeared.
Thank you for your affirmation. I will continue following in your footsteps. I look forward to being of service to you the next time, Tilde.
After a goodbye expression was sketched out, the mirror returned to normal. Klein went close to it and put away the mirror before entering the bathroom attached to the master bedroom. He took 4 steps counterclockwise and headed above the gray fog. He wanted to complete the grazing before Mr. X's spirit body dispersed, in the book world, inside a cave on a snow-laden mountain peak. Klein looked at Mr. X's corpse and carefully identified the head that had been pieced together from the fragments. He matched it with his memories of the target's picture which Miss Magician had provided him.
It's him. I hope I'll obtain traveling and record. With them, I would make a killing with this operation. Otherwise, I'll have to consider getting Miss Magician to pay more. The difficulty between hunting a sequence 5 and that of facing a demigod are 2 completely different matters.
As Klein thawed, he reached out his left palm and spread open his fingers, aiming at the corpse whose spirituality hadn't completely dispersed. Creeping hunger quickly transformed back into its original form, looking as though it was made of thin human skin, 2 eyes split open in the middle of its palm. Its pupils were bright red, as though they were dyed in blood. Amidst a cold and eerie wind, Mr. X's significantly dispersed spirit body and the resplendent beyonder specks of light that resembled the Milky Way drilled into Creeping Hunger, fixing onto a blank finger. Creeping Hunger first turned transparent as if it was a shadow of the spirit world before returning to normal. Klein closed his eyes and sensed it as his brows gradually eased. A smile surfaced on his face. His luck was pretty good this time because he had drawn one of the beyonder powers he wanted the most, Traveler's Door. It could also be called Door of Teleportation, Teleportation, or Traveling. Its effect was to allow a person to traverse the spirit world while sensing the external world. Beyonders of different sequences could endure traveling for different periods of time, due to the differences in their spirit body's potency. This made the effects of spirit world traversal and the distance differ.
If it's a sequence 9 or 8, they wouldn't be able to go beyond Backland. With my present level, I wonder if I can directly head to the primitive island which Mr. Hanged Man provided. If that doesn't work, I can split it into a few trips.
Klein thought as he smiled. At this point, he realized that a traveler's strength in head-on combat was very powerful. This was because the difficulty in using short-distance traveling was about the same as flaming jump. This also meant that a traveler could keep phasing around a target, opening up and narrowing distances as they pleased. This would catch people by surprise while also preventing them from inflicting a successful blow. Furthermore, if plenty of powers were recorded and the vigilance that accompanies immediately departing once something felt amiss, Klein suspected that even with lightning storm and hurricane, he had no way of restraining a traveler in direct combat.
Indeed, a marionettist should try to hide behind the shadows.
As Klein thought poignantly, he cast his eyes on Mr. X's corpse. Creeping Hunger had also obtained another beyonder power. It was door opening of the apprentice sequence. It was equivalent to a very weakened version of traveling and was of little value. Turning his gaze, Klein's eye noticed the ruby ring on Mr. X's hand.